Hey guys, welcome back to the Blue Deck Podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Mazarak. Before we get started with this week's episode, I have two important announcements to make. First, we're almost at the end of Season 2. Can you believe it? Season 2 is almost finished. We have this episode and one more after that. Then, and this brings me to my second announcement, then we're going to have a Christmas special. Now, I've been planning this for quite a while. I didn't know if it would come together the way I wanted, but it has, and I'm super excited about it. For the Christmas episode, we're going to take a break from Charles and his companions to get a little education on St. Nicholas. There'll be Christmas music, a brief history about St. Nicholas and his relation to Christmas traditions, and I'll also include a little something about how the story of the saint impacted me personally. It should be good. Actually, I did the recording today, and it's already putting me in the Christmas spirit. Be sure to check that out when it drops. Unlike the regular season shows, you can listen to it whenever. It doesn't have to be in order, but you probably want to hear it before the new year. One last thing about that, for parents who listen with their kids, and I love that, for the Christmas special, you may want to consider how the story of St. Nicholas, how it fits into your family situation and holiday traditions. Okay, let's get to the recap, because a lot of important stuff happened last episode, and I know you want to hear what happens next. Previously in Chapter 18. The brother of the Kaibi leader, Billy Boy, with his face erupting in warts, sores, and patchy facial hair, told stories to Charles and his friends. The first story was about a horse thief from Charles's world. One-Eyed Joe, he was called, and the story concluded with someone looking for Joe's brain in a jar. The second story was about a witch who turned an unfortunate boy into a murderous, rampaging elephant. But the third story, that was the one that really mattered. Billy Boy told of Ayanna, Queen of Hyaden, who enticed her bravest knight, Sir Ronald, to go into the Red Realm. In the tale, as the queen and knight reclined on her sofa, she explained the door to the secret world was concealed behind the mirror hanging at the entrance of her bathing den. At first the knight assumed she was teasing him, but when he examined the mirror, he discovered the hidden hinges. The mirror opened like a door, and, just as the queen had promised, there stood a corridor of stone. As the queen and knight stood at the tunnel, Ayanna explained her plan, that Sir Ronald should enter the Red Realm and deliver to that land's king a prize the queen had secured in a lockbox. Also, 13 additional knights were to go with him. In preparation of the quest, Sir Ronald is given 2 noble weapons. One is a royal sword, and the other is a gun made by a wizard. The gun is called a machine. If the knight succeeds with his mission, the queen promises him anything he wants, including her own hand in marriage. But that is a prize Sir Ronald would never collect because he and all his fellows are killed in the Red Realm. At the end of the story, a pair of important details come to light. First, the treasure hidden in Ayanna's lockbox is the heart of her own father. Second, that the Lord of the Red Realm can use royal blood to cast powerful spells, even to open doors to other worlds. Learning this, Charles wonders if Castatine used the Patch Fairy's blood to escape his world. When he asks this, the captain says, probably not, but Charles isn't convinced. After the Kaibi stories, Captain Kidd leads his rescue party once more into the desert, but this time they are riding in one of the Kaibi sand buggies. That evening, as they stop to relieve themselves and gas up their sand rail, Charles finds an opportunity to speak to the captain privately. He wants to know why Captain Kidd didn't like the Kaibis from the start. I mean, he says, they're rough around the edges and a little strange for sure. I think maybe radiation or something like the plague was turning Billy Boy's face into road pizza. But that wouldn't make you dislike them, so level with me." What the captain said next Charles would never forget. "They're werewolves." As soon as the words were out, Charles heard distant howls, and then he remembered the Kybe flag, a cartoonish full moon against a field of deep blue sky. The Kybes, the moon folk, and the moon that night glowing above was every bit as full as the one on the flag. If Captain Kidd hadn't called the crew to leave the picnic, the Kybes would have eaten them. There, feeling the pressure of near death, Charles again got into an argument with his leader, this time over the fact that Captain Kidd wasn't admitting how much danger he'd put everyone in. Also, after being asked to fix a broken flashlight, Charles is sulking over his mundane task as the team's electro-technical officer. That's where we're at, the Kybes behind, and a town called Doloptree ahead. "19. The Doloptree Shopkeepers." The sand buggy ran out of gas in the middle of the night. Where it sputtered out, we camped, and in the morning we left it where it sat. Perhaps the moon folk would find it on their return trip to the city after they'd turned back into humans. We'd almost made it to our destination. An hour's walk brought us to a real road, the first paved road we'd seen in the attic of the world, and an hour after that we found the place we were looking for. As Captain Kidd had said, Doloptree was hardly a town. The only prominent place of business was a combination gas station, convenience store, restaurant, and post office. As we approached, I saw a dozen empty gas pumps waiting for their next non-existent customer. A sign on the side of the building said diesel was available around back. From what I'd seen already, that area was oddly set up. The diesel side laid out in one long line that reminded me of an off-ramp to a roadside rest area. We'd come upon the outermost pumps half a mile before reaching the store. The pumps were at intervals 40 or 50 feet apart. Each pump had one huge green-nozzled fuel dispensary. I supposed buses or semis would fill up, parked in an extended single-file line down the ramp. But that seemed like a very inefficient arrangement. Travelers in the back would have to hoof it several minutes just to eat at the restaurant or use bathrooms. Most people wouldn't be willing to do that. Think of all the lost customers. But we kept walking, the heat of the blacktop baking the soles of my feet. William pointed to a dusty, blackened shape on the other side of the street. "Check it out, the Doloptree Motel." In the lot opposite the truck stop, only the ruined, burned bones of the motel remained. It had been a sizable structure once upon a time. Now it was only a mess of rubble with an empty swimming pool out front. Any other town would have cleaned up the mess. The fact that the people of Doloptree hadn't bothered said something unpleasant about the desert settlement. A shop neighboring the burned-down motel claimed to sell land, though that place looked long closed to me. Aside from the few businesses, there were a handful of trailer homes scattered like children's toys in the weedy plots behind the main road. They were not parked with any kind of geometry that made sense, but, unlike the motel and real estate office, they appeared inhabited by something besides ghosts. No one was outside, however, and the only transportation I saw was a generic square-bodied pickup truck and a collection of rusty bicycles in front of one of the trailers. "What kind of people live here?" I asked, but no one answered. As we approached the store's blue double doors, Captain Kidd paused at a message board to study the bus schedule. Then he checked his watch. "We're in luck. The bus only stops here twice a week, but the next one's coming in 3 hours." "I thought you just wanted to use the phone," I said. Ozzy raised a hand. "Can we get something from the restaurant? I'm starving." The captain straightened his cap. "Phone first, restaurant second." He felt his stomach with his hands. "I could eat. This place makes great pancakes and sausage. I bet you guys like milkshakes." We all nodded. Captain Kidd smiled and waved theatrically to the door. "Right this way, and mind your manners. You represent more than just yourselves now." By that I took it to mean our actions were a reflection on him. He eyed me as I walked past. What a strange leader we had, so young and innocent looking, but so sure of himself. Even so, lurking beneath his cool demeanor, I suspected trouble, offered him an ironic salute, which he accepted graciously. We walked in through the gas station. Where the convenience store ended and the restaurant began, the floor changed from gray squares of laminate to long rectangles of fake wood. There was also a greeter stand, but no one manning the unnecessary post. When we entered the restaurant, a boy turned on a bar stool. He reminded me of a kid I knew in the 3rd grade, thin, red-headed with freckles, but this version had a full mustache. His diner worker uniform looked like a costume. For that matter, so did his facial hair. It looked glued to his upper lip. He slid down off his bar stool and grabbed a pile of menus. "Sit anywhere you like." I advanced a step. "First, we need to use your phone." Yeah, well," the kid waiter looked abashed. "Sorry, but the phone's out of order." My heart sank. "You gotta be kidding me." "Sorry, sir, not kidding at all. It might be fixed next week." I eyed the captain, wanting to strangle him. He nodded to the doors. "What about the gas station? They have working telephone?" "No, sir," the waiter said. "All the phones are out. In the whole town, line was cut." Don stepped forward, offering a fake smile to the restaurant worker. "We'll sit over there." She pointed to a corner booth. We began to move in that direction until Ozzy intercepted the red-headed waiter. Ozzy studied the boy's name tag, then asked, "So, Limpkin, is that how you say it? You work here?" The uniformed boy nodded eagerly. "You said it right, and yes, sir. I can take your drink orders now, or want to sit first and look at the menus? We mix a fine cherry Sprite. It's kind of our specialty." Ozzy took a closer look at the kid's mustache. "I think we're having milkshakes, but hold on a second. Is that thing real?" The boy smirked, thumbing the bright red-orange patch of hair. "Sure is. Makes me look older, don't you think?" Captain Kidd slid in the corner booth. "That's enough, Ozzy Ernesto. You're being discourteous." William disagreed, because he lifted his sunglasses onto his forehead to meet Limpkin's eyes. "Older than what?" The waiter's face contorted into a curiously confused look. "What do you mean?" William pressed in. "I mean, how old are you?" Then I heard myself ask, "And where are all the grown-ups?" The waiter was handing out the menus. Now he stopped, looking each of us over. He eyed our backpacks and the captain's rifle. Captain Kidd had set the gun on the lip of wood between the seat back and the window. The waiter's good humor vanished. "No grown-ups around here. Not anymore, except at Salvation Mountain and the Blue Skulls and the King. But looky here, if you come about that girl, it wasn't my fault. Besides, she's gone already." "Left a week ago," Captain Kidd said. "Took the train to Atsuma, we know." "Why aren't there grown-ups?" I asked again. The boy licked the corner of his red mustache. "You're not from around here. Mister, out here monsters dwell." William nodded in a direction that might have been east. "Like the Kybes?" "Werewolves," the waiter said. "Also zombie, vampire, those weird horse people live out in the Hojo Flats." "Lots of things," Captain Kidd agreed. "But most have moved on, isn't that so?" "Most," the mustache boy said. "But far from all. I seen a giant out walking in the mist. Must have been 100 feet tall. He had a tail with bone plates all down his back. Some say he breathes fire, like a dragon, Don said. Like that, the waiter nodded. They call him the All-Be-Gone. Say he's looking for his family, but they died long ago. He doesn't know that, just wanders around like a lost pup. The mood began to relax. Dawn sat in the booth beside our leader. Then taking a menu from the waiter, she eyed the uniformed boy with serious intent. What's not your fault? He looked confused, then scared. His eyes moved to our captain, then to the rifle resting beneath the window. He took a step back, bumping into Ozzy, then tossed our menus on an open table and ran from the restaurant. Captain Kidd turned to the window, watching as a boy darted across the deserted parking lot. Then he snatched up his rifle. So much for our pancakes. Practically shoving Don out of the booth, he stood glaring at William. Maybe next time you'll use your manners? But it wasn't William's question, or even mine, that made the boy run away. It was Don's. What's not your fault? Something about Castatine, and with our overlapping questions he hadn't told us where all the grown-ups went. 2 pallid teenagers manned the attached convenience store. The older boy behind the counter had long, wavy hair pulled back into a ponytail, the hair held into place by the kind of ribbon Benjamin Franklin might have worn. According to him, the young red-headed waiter had agreed to let Castatine stay at his house while she waited for the bus. With the pretentious voice of a butler, the gas station clerk said, "Ordinarily she would have stayed at the motel, but that burned down a year ago." This he explained while petting the lapel of his blue velvet suit coat as if it were a house cat. Why was he dressed so nice to work the register of a crappy gas station, I wondered. Maybe he was going out somewhere special when he got off work. But where? Doloptree was the deadest town I'd ever seen. Then remembering the Kybes, if they were werewolves, this guy might be a vampire. Only daylight streamed in through the window, so that wasn't right. The teenager gripped the lapel of his coat. The last day, the girl told him that if he emptied the money box into her purse, she would use a potion to turn him into a radar man. Can you believe it? The captain tapped a silver coin on the counter beside the register. How much was in the money box? 100 and some, the clerk moaned. Captain Kidd tossed him the coin. The clerk caught it in one hand, then held it to the light, pinched between 2 fingers. A lot of money, mister. After a moment's hesitation, with a meaningful look to his co-worker, who was half sweeping, half listening, he tossed the coin back. Limpkin will make recompense from his paycheck. Your money would lessen the blow, but silver's no good around here. Bad for business. Captain Kidd returned the coin to his vest pocket. What'd she do with the money? Made a phone call. The pallid teenager fluttered fingers at a payphone by the restrooms. Don't know who she called, so don't ask. I thought the phones didn't work, I blurted. The clerk breathed heavily. They didn't when she was finished with them. William twitched his brow, and the sunglasses perched on his forehead dropped over his eyes. $100 is a lot for a phone call. Not when it's long distance, and everywhere is long distance from here, young man. The clerk's fingers returned to his lapel. He had lengthy, old woman fingernails, milky white and thin. What's a radar man? The captain asked. The other gas station worker walked over with a broom in hand. She was dressed with old-fashioned formality equal to her snooty coworker. Her outfit was a morbid maroon dress with black lace trimmings. Someone who hears music in the air without a radio, she said. That made me think of Captain Kidd and Castatine at the well in the Gossamer Gardens, how they'd sit listening to music drift up from other worlds. Was that what the Limpkin boy was trying to do? The female clerk turned the broomstick in her hand, looking ever so much like a witch. She gave him a potion, but it only made him fall into deepest sleep for the rest of the day. Lucky it wasn't poison, Ozzy said. He looked back toward the diner. Can either of you work the kitchen? Maybe make some of those pancakes we heard so much about. They refused. Making pancakes wasn't their business. Limpkin's replacement would be along in another several hours. Too late, in other words. The bus we were waiting for would come and go by then. When Don asked if they could send for someone else to work the diner sooner rather than later, again they answered with stiff courtesy, calling us sirs and madam, but declined to help in any way. So, even hungrier than before, we gave up on a cooked meal and shopped from the convenience store instead, the food we paid for in trade handing over William's Rubik's Cube rather than the captain's silver. William thought he'd gotten the short end of the stick. A Rubik's Cube had to be worth more than a jar of pickles, some peanut butter, a loaf of white bread, and a round of fountain sodas. But we had little else to bargain with, and before he showed the cube was solvable, the station clerks weren't ready to give him anything for it. Before we left the store, I checked the payphone for a dial tone. There wasn't one. After that, we ate in the shade of an outdoor bus stop. As we snacked, I stared out across the horizon, my eyes focusing on nothing in particular. An idea floated across my free-drifting thoughts. Maybe I'd spy that fire-breathing giant somewhere out in the distance. The monster sounded like Godzilla. Seeing it from a distance would be a thrill. No such luck, however. I saw no movements other than the clouds which rolled like huge slow-motion beach balls in sand, and birds soaring on breezes that blew too high in the atmosphere for us ground-dwellers to feel. Unprompted, the captain said, "People here can stay kids forever, like in..." He'd taken out Joseph, holding the little aquarium in his lap. When he gave the tank a swish, the tiny red crab twirled up off the rocks, like in Neverland. When we first sat down on the sheltered bench, Dawn had started on an old paperback. Now she closed the book, returning it to her backpack. When her hands folded across her crossed legs, she asked straight out, "Are you Peter Pan?" The captain snickered. "Golly, no. I'm Captain Kidd, and Neverland is make-believe, so I've been told." "Then what happened to the grown-ups? Or are you saying there are no grown-ups?" She waited for his answer. The captain just went on watching the red-shelled crab swish about its tank. "I've not spent much time here. Terribly hard to get here, as you know. But the marshal told me a plague of worms descended on this place. Little buggers got into everything, including the food." The half-eaten sandwich in my hands was losing what little appeal it already had. Captain Kidd gestured to my lunch. "That was decades ago. Your sandwich should be safe." Then eyeing his crustacean friend, he continued in a casual tone, "The worms carried evil spirits or dark magic, something like that. They were poisoned and nearly everybody died. Afterward, the kids who lived stayed young. Some thought the worms were weapons sent from the Red Realm. Who knows? Nowadays, if people want to grow up, they have to cross the gate in the wall of broken hearts that leads to the red side of the reality deck." "And the monsters?" Don asked. Captain Kidd sighed. "For some reason, if people come back from the red, they can grow up, but some of them turn to monsters. No one knows why. At least I don't." I took another bite of my sandwich. Why not? I'd already eaten half of it. It went down dryly, so I wet my throat with a splash of cherry Sprite. "The Kybes weren't grown-ups," I said. Captain Kidd tugged a rubber plug from the top of Joseph's tank. "Not yet. But they were aging, you could tell." "What about the King and Skull guys?" William asked. "Are they monsters too?" "Not them." Captain Kidd pulled the straw from his soda and dipped it into the miniature aquarium. Then he blew a torrent of bubbles into the water. The little red crab danced in a storm of churning pebbles. William looked at me and shrugged. What was there to say? Dawn began to pack away the remains of our picnic. Either the bread would fit into her backpack or the peanut butter, but not both. Deciding to keep the bread, she turned to the captain. "Who do you think Castatine called on the payphone?" He took the straw from the water, wiped it on his leg, and stuck it back in his soda. "Very likely some representative of the red, unfortunately." He tossed back the flap of his military pack, shark teeth swinging from leather cords, and returned Joseph into the darkness of the satchel. Then he got up and strolled away from us down the cracked and dust-caked blacktop. Ozzie and William continued discussing the worm plague, exchanging baseless theories about why some of the kids who went into the red came back as monsters. Dawn returned to her book. My mind went back to its aimless wandering. Funny how natural it seemed to think so little of our unnatural circumstances. I was too out of sorts, too tired from my second night without a bed to think about mysteries. Also, I was generally in a bad mood, and for good reason, but I hated feeling that way. I always despised useless complaints, but I found myself ready to go off on a tirade over just about anything. I didn't even like my sandwich. Peanut butter. Pickles weren't much better. I liked ham sandwiches and chips. Or, if it had to be peanut butter, at least have a little jelly with it. I'd already been demoted for saying I didn't trust the good old Cap 100%. What would he do if I complained about a free lunch? So I ate my food along with the others and kept quiet. Before long, the bus would come and take us to the city, which was even farther from home than we already were. Once we got there, I could only hope things would make more sense. Regardless of what we found in Atzma, that was the end of the line for me. After that, I was going home, and I would take my friends with me. We're ending there on a somber note, and that's okay. Adventures aren't all mountain peaks. In fact, I'd say most of the time they're valleys or even trenches. Charles certainly wants to go home, and to tell you the truth, I don't blame him one bit. But he can't go home yet. For one, the book isn't over, and for another, we don't really want him to go home, do we? No, I feel bad for the guy, but I prefer him finish the task. At least that's how I feel about it at this point in the tale. Remember, next episode is the last show of the season, but we'll have the Christmas special after that, and I intend to make it as special as possible. There'll be music by Brian Wages and Clonnie Gleckler, good stuff, and a contribution by a writer friendly with the podcast, Patricia J. Adams. I should probably end the show, but can I share one thing before you tune out? This week I finished the art for the book cover. Actually, if you're a regular listener, you probably noticed the podcast art has changed. Well, that's because I'm using the art from the book. Making this image was such a big deal to me. For better or worse, covers help sell books, and I was determined to make my own. Having a background in illustration, I'm incredibly picky about this sort of thing. The problem was, I don't draw or color or do any form of visual art anywhere close to as often as I used to. So I didn't know if I could do it. More specifically, I didn't know if I could make a cover that was up to the standard I wanted. I was pressured on time and traveling, not ideal at all, but I did it and I'm super pleased with how it turned out. But why am I telling you all this? Well, it's because when the cover was finished, I had such a sense of joy, of gratitude, of accomplishment. I was 2,500 miles from home, stuck on an island away from my family. My phone didn't work. I was sick. There were 100 reasons to complain, but I did it. I made the cover, and I didn't do it alone. God was with me. My wife and kids and friends all pitched in with their input online. Random people I don't even know helped me pick fonts on a Twitter poll. How crazy is that? All this to say, folks, if you haven't had that sense of accomplishment, or if you haven't had it in a very long time, I don't know, maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe you're not trying hard enough, or maybe you just need to realize how hard you are trying, how difficult it is to do what it is you're doing. Maybe your sense of accomplishment should come from fighting that daily battle and keeping your head up. Or maybe you really do need to work harder. You know where you're at. I'm not perfect at this, but I've always had ridiculous goals. Make a podcast, write novels, before that make comic books. None of these things are they even obtainable? It's really hard to tell when you can't see what's over the horizon. In all likelihood, any of these journeys would end in disaster, but I've always cast off such trivial concerns amidst a lot of self-doubt and pursued those paths less traveled. But that's my road. Yours probably looks and feels much different. But whatever it's like, press in, study what you're doing, strive, work hard, make goals, and when you meet your goals, allow yourself to enjoy that beautiful, rejuvenating sense of accomplishment. It feels so good. All right, that's it for today. Catch you next week.
Okay, bye.